Yeah, as one of the architects of the strategy to pass immigration reform, you see how well we've done over the last few years. But it's going to change. And it's going to change for the following reason. The election in 2008 was a game changer. It has changed the political space available for good policy. Those of us who worked on reform in 2006, 2007 experienced the agonizing pain of watching the political space get reduced as the debate in 2007 in particular went forward, and the revolt on the right was so intense that the 25 to 30 Republican senators that had indicated to the White House that they could support a right-leaning grand bargain bill that had been negotiated. In the end, only 12 Republican senators voted for it. Why? Because the anti-immigrant groups were successful at achieving a very important political objective of theirs, which was to get the base of the Republican Party to adopt their hardline views. The problem is that the anti-immigrant movement took over the base of the Republican Party at the same moment that the base became the problem of the Republican future. So there's a Pyrrhic victory that they've won. The base is now firmly anti-immigrant at a time when that has electoral consequences. You heard about it, you've seen it. The most remarkable thing in this election is that the conventional wisdom some 12, 18 months ago has been stood on its head. The conventional wisdom was Latinos don't really turn out in big numbers, they don't really care about immigration, and they split their vote. So they're not really a factor. And swing voters, well, let's face it, a lot of them are going to be susceptible to the racially charged wedge issue strategy of Republicans. When they hear no amnesty and illegals use benefits, they're going to vote for the candidate who adopts the hard line. And the third piece of conventional wisdom was the anti-immigrant movement is so strong that you tremble as either a Republican or a Democrat in a swing district to stand up to them. Well, look at the results of the election. The anti-immigrant movement couldn't even stop John McCain from getting the nomination. They're very strong in some primaries in the South. Give them credit. They have swung at least 7 or 8 races in Republican primaries. But how many general election races have they won at any level? We keep hearing about how it's going to work. They tried it in 2006, tried it in 2007, tried it in 2008. The results are in. Of 22 races that we looked at in the House and Senate, there was a clear difference between a Democrat that was for a more comprehensive approach and a Republican that took a hard line and it became an issue, the Democrat won in 20 of those 22. It's no longer a wedge issue that that scares Democrats. And in fact, it's been a spectacular failure when you look at the huge turnout and swing of Latino voters. Janet gave you the incredible results in this election of how many voters and how the issue plays in the community. If you unpack it a little further, though, and you look at the best proxy we have for Latino immigrants is Spanish-dominant voters, the best evidence says that in 2004, George Bush, who, remember, in 2004 gave a speech on comprehensive immigration reform in the White House and had a brilliant campaign strategy to reach Spanish-speaking Latino immigrants, Kerry beat Bush among Spanish-dominant voters 52 to 48, a virtual tie, which accounted for Bush going from 35 to 40% to a large extent among Latino voters in 2004. Just 4 years later, Spanish-dominant voters broke for Obama 75 to 25. So a fast-growing group within the Latino community swung dramatically. Latino evangelicals went from being 2/3 for Bush to being 57, 58% for Obama. Remarkable shift. And I love all this attempt by Lamar Smith and the anti-immigrant groups to say, don't pay attention to that sleeping giant behind the curtain. They don't really count and they don't really care. Well, as Marcos of the Daily Kos said, let's hope they still stay in denial, because for Democrats, it's going to be a 25-year progressive majority. Now, I have a different priority, which is immigration reform. And I think that the political space is now such that with a Democratic majority in Congress, with President Obama making a commitment to move on this in the first year, and that it is going to come up in the fall of 2009, and I think it is going to succeed. Now, you probably have missed it, but President Obama recently was talking to the leading immigrant advocate in the United States, He's not in Washington. His name is El Piolín, Tweety Bird. He's a disc jockey. And El Piolín had President Obama on his radio show just the other day. The president said, we're going to move on it in the first year. We're going to make some administrative changes. We're going to tee it up, and then we're going to move on it. He's made a commitment. He's recently spoke to it. And what he gets that, please forgive, most of the chattering class in D.C. doesn't get is that the fact is that immigration is now one of those symbols of how Washington doesn't work. It doesn't directly affect a lot of voters, but it frustrates a lot of voters. And so that demand, that urgency to get it done is quite powerful. Let me talk a little, just for a minute about policy. The other big argument is, wait a minute, how can you do immigration reform during a time of economic downturn and high unemployment? Here's how. The issue that is most contentious when you talk about high unemployment is a big increase in the future flow of immigration. I predict that the package that will emerge this year will de-emphasize a future flow. In fact, there may be a fix for ag, there may be some other changes, but for the most part, it's going to deal with the immigrants already here, the employers that hire them, and making sure that we have a fair, level playing field in which everyone is legal and paying their fair share. That's going to be the emphasis. So it's going to be on legalizing the current workforce and making sure that they have full labor rights, making sure that labor standards are enforced so that unscrupulous employers can't undercut all low-wage workers, including American workers who are working in those industries. And to make sure that there's a workable verification system that will reduce the job magnet of illegal hiring. That's the heart of comprehensive immigration reform. Yes, we need a more robust future flow, but quite frankly, it may be smart to revisit that issue when the economy really has that demand. So why would that work? Because it will increase tax revenues and lift wages. Immigration, let me repeat this. I know this is not the conventional wisdom. When you have more people in the system paying taxes, tax revenues go up at all levels. When you have employers who can no longer pay off the books because there's aggressive enforcement, you have more taxes being paid. When you had people coming forward and paying fees and fines, you have more revenue generated. Even last year in 2007, when the Congressional Budget Office analyzed the bill that was before Congress, and I hope we don't have the same bill that we had last year, believe you me, but they did analyze the legalization provisions and then the expenses that would be related to people using services later. $55 billion in added revenue, $22 billion in costs. More than $30 billion in increased tax revenues through a legalization program. That's why some academics are calling legalization part of the economic stimulus. But at least it's consistent with making sure that we have a level playing field between employers and employees. Let me just finish by saying this. This issue is, as Simon said, a defining moral issue for our generation. Right now, this debate has been hijacked by extremist organizations who don't want a solution. They want mass deportation. They dress it up. They want mass self-deportation. How's that for humanitarianism? But that's what's happened. 2007, you had a right-leaning bill drafted by the White House designed to get Republican votes. And the right wing said, no way. We don't want a bill. We want these people gone. And you don't think the Latino community heard that this election? They did. And you don't think swing voters said, you know what? Those guys play politics rather than solve problems. Let's fire them and bring in the new crew. And you don't think President Barack Obama knows that he was hired to solve problems and he'll be judged by his ability to do so? He gets it. And he gets why immigration is going to be a priority in his first year. Thank you.